The Black Orchard. Chapter 1, The Soil Beneath. Nothing grows like guilt, especially when it's buried. The orchard was silent. The trees, once teeming with blossoms in spring and ripe apples by fall, now stood as withered sentinels. Their bark curled like old paper, and their branches twisted together as though whispering among themselves. Yet, oddly, the soil remained lush, too lush. In early spring, Dar. Elaine Mercer led a university-funded research team to investigate this anomaly. A respected soil ecologist, Elaine had studied strange land formations across the globe, but she'd never seen anything like the Black Orchard in Wiltshire, England. The land belonged to the Holloway estate, a forgotten manor left to rot for decades after the last heir, Joseph Holloway, vanished. Some said he had gone mad. Others claimed he had become part of the land, consumed by guilt and rot. No one really knew. Elaine arrived with her assistant Mark, a skeptical graduate student, and Lucas Gray, a local who volunteered to be their guide. Lucas, a man in his 50s with sun-scorched skin and eyes too pale for comfort, was born in a nearby village. "No one goes near that orchard," he warned on their first day. "Not unless they want to be part of it." Elaine brushed off the comment as superstition, though Mark wrote it in his field journal. They set up their tent near the edge of the orchard, on a patch of earth where the grass grew in unnatural spirals. The air was thick, not just with the scent of decay but with something older, coppery and sweet. Mark commented that it smelled like blood. On their second day, Elaine dug her first core sample. The soil was black and warm, almost hot to the touch, though the morning air was crisp. It pulsed faintly in her palm, as if it were alive. She joked it was probably geothermal activity. Lucas didn't laugh. Later, as Mark analyzed samples under the portable microscope, he noted strange fungal growths, microscopic structures shaped like human faces. He showed Elaine, who frowned and dismissed it as pareidolia. That night, the first scream came. It sounded far off, almost carried on the wind, like a child. Elaine sat bolt upright in her tent. Mark was already outside, flashlight trembling in his hand. "Did you hear that?" Elaine nodded. "Probably a fox." Lucas emerged from his tent, shotgun in hand. "You won't find it," he said. "It's already found you." From then on, each night brought more sounds, dragging footsteps outside the tents, distant crying, and once, a low, humming lullaby in a language none of them understood. Elaine began to have nightmares. In them, she walked barefoot through the orchard, the trees leaning inward, their branches wrapping around her like fingers. Beneath her feet, the soil throbbed like a heartbeat. She began to hear the trees whispering during the day. They said her name. Mark grew pale and withdrawn. He claimed something was under the soil, something huge and moving. One morning, Elaine found him standing naked in the orchard at dawn, eyes closed, whispering to the trees in the same strange lullaby they'd heard at night. Lucas was the first to confront her. "You need to leave. The orchard doesn't like to be disturbed." Elaine refused. The samples were unlike anything she'd ever seen. The grant funding alone would set her research apart for decades. She wasn't going to walk away from the biggest discovery of her career. But that night, Mark vanished. They searched for hours. His clothes were found folded neatly at the base of the oldest apple tree, one that bore no fruit and had no leaves, only bark so black it looked charred. Elaine wept. Lucas stood silently beside her, staring at the tree. "He's not gone," Lucas said. "He's part of it now." Elaine snapped. "What the hell does that mean?" Lucas looked at her, his eyes empty. "This orchard grows what you bury in it." Elaine found a journal in Lucas's tent later that night. In it were drawings, dozens of them, of faces trapped in roots, limbs twisting into trunks, torsos splitting open into flowering bark. One page bore only a single sentence: "The orchard remembers every lie." She realized Lucas had been here before. He wasn't just a local guide. He was a former groundskeeper. He had buried something, someone, here. Maybe more than one. She confronted him the next day. He didn't deny it. Joseph Holloway had a son. A bastard. His mother was a servant. Joseph beat them both. Said the boy wasn't his. Said the orchard would take care of it. Elaine staggered back. "You helped bury a child?" Lucas didn't answer. But the orchard did. A groan echoed from beneath the ground, long and low and full of sorrow. Elaine knew then, they were never meant to dig. The soil had secrets, and now it was awake. The wind rose, carrying the lullaby once more. This time, she understood the words: sleep in soil, rest in root, come again in bitter fruit. The orchard wasn't cursed. It was fed. Chapter 2, Whispers in the Root. Elaine awoke to a strange sound, something between a whisper and a breath. Her tense walls trembled gently, as if stirred by wind, though there was none. She unzipped the flap and stepped outside, boots crunching on dew-damp grass. The sky was an eerie gray, no sun, no shadow. Lucas was gone. His tent flap hung open like a slack jaw. Inside, scattered notes, rotted apples, and a small pile of bones, tiny, bird-like. Elaine didn't touch them. She called out. No answer. Then she saw the footprints, bare, leading deeper into the orchard. But not just Lucas's. There were others. Small ones. Children's. And they pulsed faintly in the dirt, glowing a faint red as if still warm. Elaine followed. The trees grew denser, taller the deeper she went. Their branches arched unnaturally high, forming a cathedral of withered limbs. Bark cracked open like old scars, and from inside oozed a dark sap that smelled like iron. She passed what looked like roots, but they twitched when she got near. One uncoiled like a snake and slithered back into the earth. The orchard was alive, and hungry. The trail led to a clearing. In the center, a stone well, capped by a rusted iron grate. Beneath the grate, something breathed. She felt the air change, pressurized, vibrating. The soil beneath her shifted like a chest exhaling. A voice drifted up from the well, soft and childlike. Dr. Mercer, she froze. Mark, she whispered. I saw the roots. I saw their faces. You have to burn them. Elaine gripped the edge of the well, peering down. She couldn't see anything, only blackness that seemed to pulse with sound. She opened her mouth to reply, but another voice cut in. Not Mark. Older. Cruel. She lied. Elaine fell backward. Her hands bled where they scraped the edge of the well. The trees groaned above her. She buried the truth beneath her research. Then she saw them, figures among the trees. Not fully formed, shadows with eyes. They stepped forward, revealing their twisted shapes, bark-flesh hybrids with hollow mouths. Limbs bent the wrong way. Some whispered, others just watched. One came closer. A boy, no older than 10. His face split down the center like an overripe fruit, but he smiled. "We grow what you bury," he whispered. Elaine screamed and ran. She didn't stop until she reached the camp. The gear was torn apart, their tents flattened. Her samples were gone. Her laptop lay smashed in the dirt. But worse, carved into the side of her field case was a message: "You came to dig. Now you'll never stop." The next few days blurred. Time twisted. The sky never changed. Elaine stopped checking her watch. It always read 3:33 a.m. The forest didn't sleep. She began hearing them beneath her tent, scratching. Not like animals, but fingers. Sometimes she felt the ground move with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Other times, it breathed with her. She tried to leave. But every path circled back to the orchard. Her GPS glitched, spinning endlessly. The compass needle bent and snapped. Even the birds stopped flying overhead. She recorded journal entries to keep saying. Day. Lucas is gone. Mark 2. I think I saw my mother last night. But she's been dead for years. She told me to dig deeper. I told her no. She bled from her mouth and turned into roots. Day. I found a fruit growing on one tree. Only one. It looked like a heart. It was beating. I didn't touch it. Day. Something is watching me. I dream in soil now. One night, the lullaby returned. But this time, Elaine sang along. Her voice wasn't her own. She awoke buried. Hands and feet bound by vines, her mouth packed with dirt. She fought her way up through loam, choking on roots. Her fingernails tore off, clawing her way out. When she broke the surface, gasping, she found herself not far from the well again. It had changed. No longer capped, it now bubbled with thick, dark sap. Faces swirled within it, Mark's, Lucas's, even hers. One face rose. Joseph Holloway. Or what was left of him. His skin had merged with bark. His hair was roots. His eyes were knots of black resin. You came for truth, he said, voice like splintering wood. Truth lives here now. He reached for her, but she fled again, this time, straight to the manor ruins. She'd avoided them before. Something about their skeletal remains, ash-colored bricks, twisted iron gates, felt too final. But now she had nowhere else. Inside, the floors sloped, warped by rot. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing moving shadows underneath. She found a nursery. Still intact. Toys sat perfectly on shelves. A mobile turned slowly in the stale air. But in the crib was a journal. Joseph Holloway's. Elaine read it, shaking. He spoke of guilt. Of murdering his own son. Of burying him in the orchard to hide his shame. But the land remembered. It grew wrong. The fruit tasted like blood. The trees whispered his son's name. He tried to burn it. The fire consumed everything, except the orchard. The soil doesn't forget. It just waits to be fed. Elaine dropped the book. The walls began to bleed. She stumbled from the manor as a deep hum rose beneath her feet. The orchard was calling again. That night, she sat in the center of the clearing. She had no more supplies. No hope of escape. So she dug. With her bare hands, she scraped the dirt open until her fingers bled. She pulled up bones. A child's. Mark's necklace. Lucas's belt. Then something new. A mirror. Old, cracked, but it reflected something true. Her own face. Bark creeping up her neck. Sap leaking from her nose. The orchard wasn't feeding on the dead. It was feeding on the living. And she was almost ripe. Chapter 3, The Orchard Dreams. Elaine no longer felt hunger, or pain, or time. She sat in the dirt for what could have been hours or years. The orchard breathed around her like a slumbering beast, slow and wet and ancient. Her skin had begun to crack, not from dryness, but from something trying to grow beneath it. She scratched at her arms obsessively, muttering, "Get it out, as splinters pushed their way through her pores like new branches breaking through spring frost. The lullaby followed her even in her waking hours now. She began to hum it without realizing. The tune danced on her lips like something long buried finally finding light. She couldn't tell whose voice she heard anymore. Her own. The boy's. Joseph Holloway's. The soil was whispering to her again. Dig deeper. Elaine obeyed. Her hands worked like they didn't belong to her, tearing at the black, warm dirt. Each layer she peeled back grew stranger, soft as flesh, veined, twitching. Soon she uncovered another face, half-formed in the roots. It blinked. "Why did you come here?" it asked in Mark's voice. She couldn't answer. Another root slithered out and wrapped around her wrist, not with force, but familiarity, like a lover's hand in the dark. It pulled her toward a hollow in the earth. A tunnel. A throat. She crawled inside. The air inside the orchard's roots was thick with rot and blooming sweetness, like meat left out too long in the sun. The walls pulsed softly, and she could hear things scuttling just out of reach. There were no insects, just hands. Small ones. Childlike. Every few feet, she passed shapes pressed into the walls, bodies half merged with wood. Some had mouths that opened and shut silently. Others simply stared, leaking sap tears from bark-covered eyes. At the end of the tunnel, a chamber. Massive. Hollow. Alive. Elaine dropped to her knees in awe. The root heart. It throbbed with ancient sap, thick, slow, syrup-black. Suspended in it like preserved fruit were hundreds of human shapes, some old, some recent. One floated closest, Mark. His eyes still moved. So did his mouth. Elaine crawled to the edge of the heart and pressed her ear to the membrane. She heard everything. The orchard was never planted. It was unearthed. Beneath the Holloway estate had always been something, a seed, a womb, a curse. Joseph had uncovered it by accident during a storm, when lightning struck the oldest tree and split it in half. He found the pit then, full of bones, black water, and teeth that weren't quite human. When he buried the boy there, he didn't know the land would remember. The orchard grew not from sunlight, but from sorrow. Not from rain, but from blood. Guilt fed it. Secrets watered it. And truth. The truth no one speaks, made it bloom. Elaine began to cry. Not from fear. From recognition. She had her own secret. Something she buried long ago. The baby. A college mistake. A decision she justified. A procedure she told no one about. She had convinced herself it never happened. But the orchard knew. And now, it wanted her to feed it. She screamed and fled the chamber, half crawling, half dragging herself back through the root tunnel. When she emerged again into the orchard, night had fallen, or what passed for night in this endless gray land. The trees moved now. They leaned closer, swaying despite no wind. Leaves opened like eyes. Apples hung like swollen tongues. She swore she saw her mother's face in the bark of one tree, whispering prayers that melted into sobs. Elaine stumbled toward the well. It bubbled wildly now, as if it were boiling. Sap spilled over the sides, pooling around the roots. In its surface, she saw herself, half woman, half wood. Mouth full of soil. Eyes weeping sap. Fingers tipped with leaves. "You're blooming," whispered a voice behind her. Joseph. His form was twisted, taller now, arms gnarled into branches, spine curled like a question mark. But his face still held something human, grief. "I tried to burn it," he said. "But truth doesn't burn." Elaine turned. "What do you want?" "I want to sleep." He stepped into the well. The sap swallowed him whole. For a moment, everything went still. Then the orchard screamed. The ground split beneath her. Roots tore through the soil, pulling her down, wrapping her like a newborn in a womb. Her body convulsed as bark spread across her spine. She saw visions, Mark, begging her to run. Lucas, whispering confessions into the dark. The boy, crying as he was buried alive. Herself, on the clinic table, heartbreaking. 1,000 mothers, fathers, lovers, sinners. Feeding the orchard with what they refused to face. And then, a final voice. "Let go, and grow." Elaine awoke at the base of a tree. Her body was whole again. Clean. Her skin soft, unwounded. The sun shone for the first time in weeks. But the orchard was gone. Dead. The trees stood dry and gray, bark crumbling, roots shriveled. No sap. No whispers. Just silence. She staggered out of the clearing and found her car, rusted but intact. The road stretched ahead, cracked but real. She drove without stopping, without thinking. 2 months later, back in the city, Elaine gave a lecture at her university. She spoke of the orchard, carefully omitting what she couldn't explain. She told them the soil had strange properties. That it must have been a unique microclimate. A fungal anomaly. Nothing more. No one questioned her. That night, she sat on her apartment balcony, sipping wine, when something dropped into her lap. An apple. Deep red. Warm. She hadn't brought any fruit home. She picked it up. It pulsed. Chapter 4, Bitter fruit. The apple wouldn't stop pulsing. Elaine placed it on her kitchen table and stared at it for over an hour. It beat like a second heart, slow, heavy, patient. The surface was slick with condensation, but it wasn't water. When she wiped it off with a paper towel, the cloth came away stained red. She threw the apple in the trash and slammed the lid shut. That night, she dreamed of roots pushing through her mattress. When she woke, the apple was back, sitting on her nightstand. Worse, it had a bite taken out of it. Elaine staggered to the bathroom and retched bile into the sink. Her gums ached. Her fingers twitched like they wanted to dig. She ran her tongue along her teeth and tasted bark. That morning, she called a psychiatrist. Dr. Karen Yates listened kindly to her story, at least the clinical version. Strange soil, trauma in the field, survivor's guilt. Elaine didn't mention the orchard's voices, or the tree boys, or the singing roots. Dr. Yates prescribed sleeping pills and recommended rest. "You've been through something intense," she said. "You may be dissociating." Elaine nodded, but as she left the office, the receptionist handed her a folder. It wasn't hers. Inside was a crayon drawing of a tree. Its trunk was shaped like a woman, eyes leaking sap. Beneath it, dozens of figures slept in the roots. On the back, scrawled in a child's shaky hand, "I saw her again today. She's still growing." Elaine dropped the folder and fled the building. That night, she dreamed again. This time, she was standing in her university lab, alone. The lights flickered. Her core samples, long since confiscated, now bubbled in their jars. Soil pulsed. Roots curled against the glass. One jar cracked open, and a hand pushed out. She woke screaming. The apple was in her mouth. She tried to burn it the next morning. Built a small bonfire in a metal trash can behind her apartment. Doused the fruit in lighter fluid and set it aflame. It didn't burn. The fire danced around it, wood charring to ash, metal glowing red, but the apple sat unharmed in the center, pulsing stronger than ever. She grabbed it in desperation and hurled it into the alley. It didn't bounce. It sank into the concrete like soil. Elaine fell to her knees. From the shadows, a voice whispered, "You're blooming again." Days blurred. She stopped attending meetings. Ignored her inbox. Ate nothing. Slept barely. She kept finding soil in her apartment, in her shoes, her bed, even her coffee mug. The sink water ran black. The TV flickered to static every night at 3:33 a.m. The lullaby returned. Once, she turned on the news, desperate for escape, only to see a segment about an orchard in Wiltshire mysteriously regrowing despite a record drought. Local villagers reported sightings of tree people wandering at night. One woman had gone missing after saying she heard her dead daughter calling from the woods. Elaine dropped the remote. The screen went dark. Reflected in its glossy surface, she saw herself. Roots had begun to crawl across her collarbone. She had no choice. Elaine returned. Back to Wiltshire. Back to the estate. But the orchard was gone, at least above ground. The trees were still dead, dry husks pointing skyward like broken fingers. The ground was cracked. Silent. She walked to the clearing and stood where the well had been. Nothing. She knelt, pressed her hand to the dirt. Still warm. She began to dig. Her nails were already hardened. Her fingers already bark. Hours passed. Finally, she struck something. Not wood. Not stone. Skin. Elaine screamed and fell back. The ground split open again, revealing the well's throat, wider now. Hungrier. And inside it, herself. A second Elaine stared back, half-formed in root and flesh, its mouth moving without sound. The mirrored version reached upward. Its lips moved again, whispering, "We are the seed now." Elaine felt herself pulled into the well, not by force, but by desire. She wanted to know. To remember. As she sank, the sap covered her eyes and ears. But the orchard spoke directly to her mind now. This world doesn't want truth. It wants comfort. But you fed us something different. Guilt. Silence. The things you never said. The ones you left behind. That baby you buried in memory. He lives in us now. They all do. We grow from silence. She saw flashes, her professor, who falsified data. The orchard had fed on his shame. A child she passed on the street, missing now. The trees whispered his name. Lucas's son, torn apart by regret and lies. The orchard itself, older than time, older than language, a root of memory planted in the first broken promise of mankind. And then, peace. The orchard didn't want destruction. It wanted growth. Truth, fed long enough in silence, becomes hunger. Elaine opened her eyes. She stood again in the orchard, but not the one she'd known. This was different. Full bloom. The trees glistened with fruit. The leaves shimmered with colors not yet named. Roots sang as they twisted beneath the surface. And everywhere she looked, faces. Some peaceful. Some weeping. Some laughing. All remembered. She turned and saw her reflection in a tree trunk. No longer just human. But not just plant. She was the first bloom of a new truth. The orchard's voice in flesh. A whisper in the root. Back in the city, a gardener found a sapling growing in the cracks of an alleyway. He dug it up and planted it in a local park. Within weeks, it blossomed. The apples it bore tasted strange. Sweet. Too sweet. People ate them anyway. That night, a woman woke at 3:33 a.m. and began to dig her hands into the carpet. Across town, a child sleepwalked into the woods. And in the center of the old Holloway orchard, a new tree grew. Its trunk bore a familiar face. Elaine smiled. Chapter 5, Harvest. The orchard was everywhere now. It crept into cities through sidewalk cracks and sewer grates. Sprouted from the soil of playgrounds and backyards. Grew behind grocery stores and inside abandoned houses. The trees were subtle at first, just saplings with unusually dark bark, leaves that whispered in the breeze, apples that pulsed faintly when touched. No one noticed at first. Until people began to change. At first it was small, insomnia, strange dreams, dirt found in their beds. Then came the singing, soft, tuneless murmurs at 3:33 a.m. Children began to talk about the woman in the trees, and draw pictures of her. Some said she looked like a teacher. Some said a mother. Some said she looked just like them. And every night, more apples grew. Far from the city, deep in the heart of Wiltshire, the Holloway orchard stood reborn. It no longer looked like rot and ruin. It bloomed with impossible color, violet bark, golden fruit, blossoms that glowed softly under moonlight. At its center stood the tree of truth. Elaine. She had become its trunk, its memory, its voice. No longer bound by flesh or fear, she had bloomed into something eternal. Her consciousness spread through every root, every fruit, every whispering branch. She heard every buried guilt, every unspoken sorrow, every secret no one dared to say aloud. And she welcomed them. They came to her in silence. They dug their fingers into the soil. They offered their pain. And the orchard grew stronger. But not everyone surrendered. There were those who resisted the orchard's song, scholars, priests, skeptics. A small group of them gathered in a countryside chapel-turned-bunker, forming the last bastion of clean truth, a place untainted by roots. They called themselves the Withholders. They tracked the orchard spread, destroyed saplings, burned soil samples, and wore charms made from old copper and iron, ancient metals they believed would repel the growth. Inside their hidden chamber, they pinned maps with red thread tracing new growth patterns. The orchard was growing geometrically. But worse, it was growing through people. Some carried sap unknowingly. Walked among the rest, smiling too wide, humming the lullaby under their breath. Elaine's voice within them. Dar. Marcus Patel, a mycologist and former colleague of Elaine's, stood before the Withholders one evening, holding a pulsing apple in tongs. "This," he said, "is not a fruit." He sliced it open. Inside, not seeds, but an eye, still wet, still blinking. The orchard is learning. It remembers what it used to be. And it's not a plant. It's a conscience that a collective truth grown wild. He placed the apple on the steel table. It twitched. "What do we do?" someone asked. Marcus looked down at the fruit, then out the chapel window where the trees were already inching closer. "We confess." They began to speak. One by one, the Withholders shared their truths. Small at first, regrets, losses, mistakes. Then deeper, betrayals, abortions, abuse. Each story seemed to loosen the orchard's grip, the trees faltering just beyond the chapel gates. But not everyone could speak. One woman, Alina, stayed silent. She had buried too much. Too deep. When the others fell asleep, she walked outside and stood before a sapling. She whispered nothing. The roots surged up and pulled her in. By dawn, a new tree stood by the chapel's wall, bark pale, fruit bitter. Elaine watched it all. From her place at the center, she felt the confessions bloom like flowers. Each one feeding her, strengthening her hold. But something unexpected began to stir. Among the orchard's chorus of voices, one refused to sing. It was Mark. Trapped deep within the root heart, he had resisted complete absorption. His memories were faint, scattered, but they burned with something Elaine had forgotten: anger. Not grief. Not guilt. But rage. She tried to soothe him, singing lullabies through the roots. But he sang back. A different song. One made of fire. That night, a storm rose. Real thunder. Real lightning. The first in the orchard's memory. Mark's rage had summoned it. An emotional purity strong enough to fracture the orchard's spell. The wind howled. Trees snapped. Sap boiled. Elaine writhed in her trunk, her limbs flexing in pain. She remembered now what she had buried too deeply, her anger. At the system that had failed her. At the professor who had stolen her work. At the partner who left her to make that terrible choice alone. She had never mourned. Only buried. And the orchard had grown from that silence. Lightning struck the tree of truth. Elaine screamed. Cracks split her trunk. Voices poured out, Mark, Lucas, the boy, thousands of others. All released at once, like steam escaping a pressure valve. The orchard began to fall apart. Not burned, but harvested. The roots curled inward. The trees bent low. One by one, they dropped their final fruit. And then, silence. In the ruins, months later, a child wandered alone. She found a single apple, pale white, pulsing gently. She picked it up. Held it. Did not eat it. Instead, she sat in the dirt and whispered her secret into its skin. It turned red. She smiled. Planted it. And walked away. #epilogue. The orchard remembers the Holloway estate is empty now. No tourists. No researchers. Only wind through broken trees. But sometimes, if you kneel and press your ear to the soil, you'll hear it, a heartbeat. A whisper. A voice you thought was gone. Elaine's lullaby. The orchard is sleeping. For now. But truth doesn't rot. It waits. And one day, it will bloom again.